Hey y'all, today we are going to be talking about visas. Remember that this is the third video in a series on basically how to become an expat, how to move abroad. We've already talked about my personal expat story and how I came to be living here in Mexico City. And yesterday we talked about what are the things you need to consider as you start the process. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Adelia of pickygirltravelstheworld.com. That's my blog where I write about my life as an expat. That is also where you can book a call with me if you want to dig deeper into becoming an expat or figuring out your finances so that you can do that or travel the world. But as promised, let's get down to it and let's talk about visas. First thing we need to keep in mind, every country is different. Every country has their own policies. They have their own names for visas. So we'll talk about visas sort of in general, and I'll give you a few specific examples. But as you narrow down the countries you are interested in, you're gonna need to be familiar with the type of visas and the terminology that they use. I mentioned before that it is common for people to move abroad and just string together a series of tourist visas. So let's talk about tourist visas. A tourist visa is exactly what it sounds like. You are getting permission to come to that country to be on vacation. If you are a US passport holder, there are a lot of countries where you never physically get a tourist visa. They don't put anything in your passport because we have, I think, visa-free access, or at least we used to before the pandemic, to something like 158 countries. So it's not something you typically need to apply for. I'll give you an example here in Mexico. As a US citizen, you don't need to do anything to apply for a Mexican visa other than show up and show your passport. They give you a piece of paper, and then on that piece of paper, you get a certain number of days you are allowed to stay in the country. The maximum is 180 days. Most people get that. And so you are promising to leave the country at the end of 180 days. Well, what some people have figured out to do is, hey, I can leave, I come back, I get a brand new 180 days. 180 days is for Mexico. Other countries, some countries it's 30 days. Some countries it is 90, like Honduras, where I used to live, that was a 90-day tourist visa. If you are going to visit an EU country in the Schengen zone, that is a 90-day visa. But unlike the one in Mexico, you can't just leave the Schengen zone, pop back in and get a new visa. They limit you to, I believe, 90 days per year. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly. So again, the idea behind a tourist visa is you're there to be on vacation. But if you are planning to be a digital nomad, this might be a good option for you because you may never stay in a country more than a month or two. So maybe if you're constantly moving, it's a matter of one tourist visa after another. I will say that as digital nomading becomes more popular, we may see governments crack down on that, because if you're on vacation, technically you're not supposed to be working, because if you're working, they may want a piece of that tax money. So I don't know. Governments really haven't caught up with the reality right now, but that's something I expect to happen in the future. There are some countries that have really long tourist visas. If you are a US passport holder, Albania and the Republic of Georgia both have 365-day tourist visas. It's not anything you gotta apply for. You just show up with your US passport and you get to stay in the country for a year. Especially if you're doing a sabbatical or a gap year, you don't really plan on working, that might be perfect. Georgia, I hear, has great wine. I've not been able to visit yet, but it's on my list. The Bahamas doesn't have 365 days. I want to say it's like 345. It's pretty long. So tourist visas can go from 30 days up to about a year, depending on the country. Some countries will let you leave, come back, get a brand new visa. Some areas, like the Schengen zone, are more restrictive with how much time you can spend there within a calendar year. Now, most of these other visas I'm going to talk about require you to do some kind of application process before you go, and generally you have to start the process outside of the country. But again, remember, every country has their own set of rules, so somebody could be doing their own thing. Another way to get a visa to stay in a country, let's say you want something longer term than a tourist visa, you could possibly qualify for some kind of family ancestry type visa. This could be, we've all seen 90-Day Fiancé. You could get a fiance visa in some countries. Some countries even have girlfriend visas, like the Netherlands. I don't think they call them that, but that's in essence what they are. The Netherlands, Denmark, if you're in some kind of romantic relationship, and I don't know that it has to be like official, that you've been married in a church or whatever, but basically you are in a romantic relationship with a citizen of that country, you can get a visa that way. There are also family visas that can get you in because your parents are from that country or your grandparents are from that country. A lot of these are not just visa, they include citizenship. So if your parents or your grandparents are from Ireland, you can get Irish citizenship. Ireland is in the EU, therefore you then have access to the entire European Union. Other countries that have similar things like Italy, Hungary, Spain, Mexico, like if you marry a Mexican, you can get residency here. If your parents were born in Mexico, you can get residency, you can get citizenship because of that. Another way, I'm not encouraging anybody to do this, I'm just sharing information, but if you have a baby somewhere and your baby is a citizen, I know Mexico is a country like that, the parent of a citizen gets residency. So, if you're older and your kids have residency somewhere else, maybe they can hook you up. That's a thought. Now, there are a lot of countries that will allow you to have a work visa, and it will vary from one country to another how you get that. But as a general rule, if you want a job in another country, you have to find a company that is willing to sponsor you. A lot of countries require that the company sponsoring you has to prove that there is nobody local with your skills, your qualifications, or that can do the job. And I mean, that makes sense. They want to save jobs for their people. So getting a work visa is often more difficult, especially if you're trying to go, if you don't have a job already lined up, you're trying to go at this alone, it can be more difficult. If you work for a multinational corporation in the US, it might be worth finding out, do they have offices elsewhere? How does one go about getting considered for a position that's in another country? Because if your company sponsors your visa, that's going to be a whole lot easier. There are some countries that have a shortage of workers, of qualified workers, and these are a lot of times called critical needs visas, critical shortage visas. The UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they'll have a list of positions professions that they're like, we need more people who do this. If your profession is on that list and you meet some other criteria, generally they would like you to be younger. If you are under 35, this is definitely something you want to look into. You can do it older if there is a shortage in your profession, but it's a little trickier. There are also countries like New Zealand, I know, does a work holiday visa. There are a couple of European countries that do it as well, but they're not coming to mind right now. Where basically you want to stay longer than a month, but you maybe don't want to stay there forever. You can get a job. Work holiday visas tend to be for people under 30. A few countries bump theirs up to 35, but you definitely usually have to be on the younger end to get a work holiday visa. It's limited for, let's say, maybe a year. You find a job. When you get there, it's less. There are less hoops than if you are trying to fill a critical shortage visa. It's more like, yeah, you can come here, you can try and find you a job, and you find you a job, you can stay X amount of months. Another way to kind of get a work, this is sort of half work visa, half student visa. It's a weird category. You can work as an au pair. Again, you probably need to be younger, like under 30. You can, I know France has an au pair visa. You can work with a family, like live with them, take care of a young child, like drop them off at school, that sort of thing, so that you can live in France and learn the language. That's kind of, you're studying, but you are working. So we'll go ahead and talk about work visa, not work visas. We'll go ahead and talk about student visas. I mentioned in yesterday's video, I think it was, that don't think you're too old for a student visa. I've yet to find a country that had an age limit on their student visas. You can apply for a student visa in most countries to go to university or to study the language. So you want to study French, you can get, which is kind of a long-term visa for like a year to go to language class. But you could get a visa that would allow you to stay there more than the regular 90 days that a tourist visa would give you. As far as going to university, this I think is like the best kept secret in the world. There are quite a few countries in Europe that teach classes, university classes, in English at either a significant discount compared to universities in the US or for free. So let's think about that. You can live in another country, you can get a degree, and it's going to be way cheaper than what you would be paying in the United States. Yeah, sign me up for that. Several of the countries will allow you to work on a student visa. I know Germany will, and I believe Spain will as well. You can work like 20 hours a week in addition to whatever you're studying. I think it's Norway. It's either Norway or Sweden. I can't remember which one. You can't work, but university is free. But you do have to have money in the bank to prove that you can support yourself, but you won't pay for the cost of university. That's still a better deal than you would get in the US. Another way to get a visa is through direct investment or like opening a business, a startup. The business visa, I think this is one that a lot of people miss, especially if you are entrepreneurial. A lot of countries, you can open up a business locally that will employ people, and you don't even have to employ a bunch. It could be like 5 people, but that could get you a long-term visa, possibly even flip that into residency if that's your goal later on down the line. Another way is through direct investment. Some of them, like Panama, I think you need to put $5,000 in a Panamanian bank account and leave it there. Sometimes direct investment is simply putting money in a bank. Sometimes it is you need to buy a property that's worth X amount of dollars. Sometimes you hear these called golden visas, the ones that require you to buy property. That the numbers tend to be high, but hey, if you got it, it's an easy way to get in. All right, digital nomads and freelancers. Let's talk about this. Before COVID hit, there were very few countries, if any, that had visas strategically geared toward digital nomads, freelancers, or remote workers. Not to say there weren't people doing those things and living in these countries, but there wasn't a visa specifically for that. But with COVID, with the decline in tourism, a bunch of countries, primarily like Dubai, in the Caribbean, have seen this and thought like, hey, we could get those people. These are people who like to travel. They're going to put money in our economy. If they've got a job, we can allow them to come here. Now, there is a difference. And this is, if this is a route you're thinking about going, you will want to look carefully. Is it a visa for a remote worker? Like they want you to have a job at at a company, and you can work from anywhere. They're like, hey, come work from our country. Some visas are only for remote workers. Then there are some that they don't care if you have a remote job, if you have your own company, if you are a freelancer. They don't care as long as you can show that you've got income. They will allow you to come in, and they vary on how long you can stay, how much the visa costs, how much income you need to have. So for instance, the Cayman Islands will allow you to stay for 2 years, but you need to show $100,000 in income per year, okay? There are some that are much more affordable. A lot I saw wanted somewhere between $50,000 a year or $2,000 a month. $2,000-$3,000 a month is a good gauge. Most were for a year. Dubai wants you to have $5,000 a month to stay for 12 months, but Dubai is expensive, because if you are making less than that, you might not be comfortable in Dubai. Iceland was another one that stood out to me. They will give you 6 months, but you need to make something like $7,000 a month. But here's one that's super budget. Portugal, this is not really a digital nomad visa. Both Portugal and Spain, they have basically a non-lucrative visa, or a visa for someone who has independent income. In Portugal, I think it's like $600 a month you need to be able to show for the D7 visa. I know annually it's something like $7,000, 7,000 euros. It's not a lot. Spain is more. For the non-lucrative visa in Spain, you need to show about 25,000 euros annually. But if you are working remotely or you're a freelancer, that's very doable. Much more doable than 100 grand. There are also retirement visas. There are also retirement visas, but sometimes this may straddle a category. Like Spain's non-lucrative visa, you could consider that to be a retirement visa, because if you have a pension and you're getting at least 25,000 euros or the equivalent for your pension, you could then retire in Spain on that non-lucrative visa. I mentioned that I am on a retirement visa here in Mexico because there's no age minimum on it. Long as I either had income at a certain amount, or I could show that I had savings of a certain amount, I could qualify for that visa. Nicaragua, oh my gosh, Nicaragua is a bargain. They have a retirement visa. You need to be 45, but you only have to show $600 a month income for one person. If it's a couple, you need $150 for the next person. If you've got kids, $150 per kid. You need to show that amount of income per month for the retirement visa. But they have another one that they call a rentista visa, which you need $750 a month, and there is no age minimum. So there is a whole range of options here. If you don't want to work, you don't want to go to school, there are countries that have very high minimum income. Like when I first started country shopping, I thought, ooh, it'd be awesome to live in Switzerland. And then I looked at the income required for the retirement visa in Switzerland, $100,000 a year. And that's when I knew Switzerland does not have time for poor people like me, and I would not be living there. But then you've got places like Nicaragua, Panama is very affordable. So in Latin America, I've seen that term rentista visa several times. I don't know if in Europe or in Asia they have that as well. And I just realized most of the examples I've given you have been in Latin America or in Europe. Malaysia is a good option in Asia if you are looking either at a business visa or a retirement visa. South Africa is another one. They've got a non-lucrative visa. They've got South Africa also has a critical shortage visa. I'm not super familiar with it, but the point being, there are lots of options for you. Many of the types of visas I mentioned, some of them will be for a year and you can renew so many times. And then depending on the country, some countries at the end of those renewals, you gotta go. But in a lot of them, you can then turn that visa into residency, most likely permanent residency. So if that is a goal, that is something that you want to think about is, you know, how can I get in and who will allow me to take this visa I have and allow me to flip that into residency. So that's it for today. I will put a link below to a couple of websites that I found useful for a couple of websites that I found useful for visas. I will say it is not, I've yet to find any place that was a solid one-stop shop, everything you want to know about visas from everywhere. But this site had a lot of that. It'll be a good starting point, and then you can go and look other places. So thank you for watching. I'll see y'all tomorrow. We'll do one more video in this series. I don't know. That's my plan right now. If there is something specific that you want to know about the move abroad process, how to become an expat, leave that in the comments and possibly I can make a video on that as well. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and until next time, I'll see y'all tomorrow.